The war in Gaza has been going on for 2 years, with tens of thousands dead and a humanitarian catastrophe. Meanwhile, Tel Aviv is announcing plans to completely establish control over Anglo-Saxon territory, and there are even talks about relocating the population to third countries. Now, Trump's plan is being actively discussed. What is the envisaged resolution to the situation, and can Russia and China act as guarantors, as some Arab countries are calling for?
The situation is, of course, catastrophic, without any exaggeration. The word genocide and famine are being uttered from many European capitals and from many official representatives of international organizations. Children are dying of exhaustion and starvation. The total death toll, according to official figures alone, is 65,000 over the past 2 years, the vast majority civilians, women, children, and the elderly. 170,000 have been injured, and hundreds upon hundreds of thousands have been rendered homeless. That's 65,000 dead by comparison, 65,000 civilians over 2 years. This is more than twice as many as during the entire period of the situation in Ukraine since the coup. The number of civilian casualties in Ukraine over the past 12 years is lower than the number in Palestine over the past 2 years. The situation is extremely dire. You mentioned some exotic ideas that were floated early on during the Trump administration's deliberations: Rivieras, resettlements, resorts, and recreational areas, but Arab countries categorically opposed them. First and foremost, Egypt and Jordan, as Palestine's closest neighbors, where, in fact, our American colleagues wanted to resettle the majority of Gaza Strip residents. Then there were reports that when the Arabs took an intransigent stance, they began looking elsewhere. Somalia, even Indonesia, and South Sudan were mentioned. Now, I think everyone understands that this would be a disaster not only for the Palestinians in a humanitarian sense, but also for the credibility of the United Nations, which proclaimed a Palestinian state alongside the State of Israel back in 1947. Back then, the Arabs behaved, perhaps somewhat recklessly, and events began that ultimately resulted in bloody clashes and the shrinking of the territories intended for a Palestinian state. Nevertheless, the decisions of the UN, the Security Council, and the General Assembly have not been overturned. A state must be created. Prime Minister Netanyahu recently spoke with President Putin, including on the Palestinian issue. He has publicly stated repeatedly that there will be no Palestinian state. If you look at Donald Trump's plan, which we consider a positive step, given the need to stop the bloodshed, save lives, and restore the Gaza Strip, Gaza City, or what's left of them, Trump proposed his 20 points, which mention the word statehood, but it's phrased quite generally and in a context that only addresses what remains of the Gaza Strip. The West Bank isn't mentioned in this context, but we are realists. We understand that this is probably the best thing on the table right now, at least the best in terms of acceptability for the Arabs, in terms of not being rejected by Israel, which is how I would characterize Netanyahu's position. The most important thing, of course, is that it be acceptable to the Palestinians. Hamas, which is part of the Palestinian people and part of the problem, we strongly condemned the terrorist attack carried out by Hamas 2 years ago, on October 7, 1923, against civilians, killing 100 and taking dozens hostage. This is a crime, but it is also a collective punishment for such terrorist attacks against the entire Palestinian people, a gross violation of international humanitarian law. When pointed out to them at the time, a number of Israeli officials stated that this was unacceptable, that the guilty should be punished, not innocent people, women, children, and the elderly. They responded, "There are no civilians there. Everyone there is a terrorist, starting from the age of 3. From the age of 3, yes, extremism is certainly fueled there, but for many years I remember with our Israeli colleagues in New York, when I worked, and then when I became a minister, we told them, pointing out the need to abandon intransigence, to abandon attempts to stall the UN decision. We told them that the unresolved Palestinian problem for almost 80 years now is the main factor fueling extremism in the Middle East, because children are born, go to school, and in school they are told that we should have had our own country, our own state. There is a UN decision. Israel was created, but Palestine was not created. My Israeli colleagues, I even have many friends there, they were even offended by me. Why are you trying to justify everything? It's not that simple. Because when in society for decades, more than one generation is raised in a situation where their aspirations, legitimate, approved by the UN, are simply ignored, such sentiments are very difficult to contain. So I once again return to Donald Trump's plan, a realistic plan, if the Palestinians accept it. But of course we wish success to the indirect negotiations that are now taking place in Egypt with the participation of Turkey and the Egyptians, Qataris, Americans, and of course Israel, which is negotiating with Hamas through intermediaries. It is very important to unconditionally stop all military actions. The fact that Hamas places special emphasis on guarantees of non-repetition of strikes and non-resumption of hostilities in the Gaza Strip, and especially in the city of Gaza, this is a reflection of the fact that they are learning lessons from the experience that preceded the current situation. Even at the beginning of this year, there were proposals that seemed to have begun to be carried out, and then Israel, having completed the first stage, resumed hostilities, citing Hamas's failure to fulfill its conditions. Therefore, it is crucial to work out the details here to prevent a relapse. We saw how, in Tel Aviv, Trump and Netanyahu were shown speaking with the Qatari Prime Minister from the top office, and how Trump tried to secure a guarantee on live television that such actions would not be repeated. In this case, it was against Qatar, but under the pretext that Hamas leaders were present in Doha. So we wish them success. If we can help in any way, we will, of course. President Putin stated very clearly at the Valdai Forum that we would, of course, like to help create a Palestinian state, but we have to start somewhere, and the state will come later. This goal should not be removed from the agenda. And our Western colleagues must, of course, bear their share of responsibility for playing a major role in stalling decisions on the creation of an independent Palestine in both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Macron, then Starmer, announced back in June that they would go to the UN General Assembly and recognize everything there. But if you've already decided to recognize it in June, why not do it straight away? Perhaps they were hoping that within 2 or 3 months there would be nothing left to recognize, nothing left of Palestine. Yes, I mentioned the West Bank, of course. The situation there is also very alarming, because from the perspective of future Palestinian statehood, as required by the UN resolution, practically the entire territory there is already occupied by Israeli settlements. I've heard, it's never been officially stated, but people, including political scientists and experts, are saying that there are plans to establish 2 or 3 municipalities in the West Bank, where Palestinian leaders will be installed, but I don't know who or how they will govern. These are the kinds of things. But I say again, it is very important for us now to stop the bloodshed. And in this sense, Trump's plan gives hope.